Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture what we are going to do is that we are going to go ahead and design a new activity which is going to be called as a setup activity. So we already have the register activity and login activity, but if you notice any application, then there is always going to be one more form. If you take a case of a website, there is always going to be one form which is going to basically set up all the user information such as his contact number, his let's say profile picture and everything like that, which is different from the login credentials, but this is the information which is required in any application. So for our setup activity, what we are going to do is that we are going to get the user a name, we are going to get the user image. So these are the two things which we are going to extract from the user and save it in our setup activity. So without wasting any time, let's directly go ahead and add in a setup activity to our application. So the first thing which you need to do is go to app folder, go to activity, select an empty activity. Let's name this thing as setup activity, click finish. And here we are going to learn one interesting concept, that is when the user actually selects some kind of profile picture from the gallery, what is going to happen is that he's going to be able to crop the image according to his own size. So he doesn't need to necessarily upload the entire image, but we are going to also learn about how to provide the cropping functionality. So here what we are going to do is that we are going to go ahead and start creating the layout for this first. So we'll go right ahead in the activity setup underscore XML, and let's make this thing as linear layout because it's sweet and simple, and set the orientation to vertical. And now let's add a few elements. So the first thing which we want here is going to be nothing but the image view, or let's say the image button, because we want to make it a button so that when the user actually clicks over there, what's going to happen is that it's going to go ahead and ask the user to take an image and drop it over here. So that's going to be, let's say, 150 dp by 150 dp. So now let's go ahead and set it in the center. So what we will do is that we will set the left margin equal to something like, let's say 30, or let's say 50, or let's say 90 dp. So it now appears in the center. So now what you could do is that you could go ahead, open up your favorite web browser, and you could simply search for any image. So you could type in as let's say dummy profile image, and when you hit enter, you are going to get tons of images over here like this in the PNG format. So make sure that you download any PNG format image, and later what you could do is that you could set the image button value to that particular image. Now it's extremely simple, so I'm not going to do that for you, so make sure that you do this on your own. So once you have set up the image value over here, now let's go ahead and accept the name as well. So this is going to be an edit text, and that is going to be match parent wrap content, and let's say the ID is going to be something like let's say at plus ID. That is going to be, let's say, display name. And let's say we have a hint over here which says something like enter user name. And once this thing is done, we are pretty much good to go. So only thing which you need to do now is that you need to add up a button which is going to be match parent wrap content for the width and the height. And let's say the text is going to be something like, let's say we type in done over here. So let's assign an on click to this as well. So the on click for this button is going to be something like, let's say done button clicked. And also let's assign the on click to the image button as well. So what we will do is that we will go ahead and name this thing as, let's say, image button clicked. So we will type in on click equals image button clicked, and I guess that's already an ID. So instead we are going to choose something else. So let's type in profile image button clicked. So once this thing is done, we are basically good to go. And also let's make sure to assign it an ID as well, because you do need to assign it an image over here. So let's assign it an ID, and let's call that ID as, let's say, setup image button. So once this thing is done, we are now good to go. So the next thing which you need to do is that you need to start creating the logic behind this. So let's first go to the setup activity and let's initialize the variables which we need to. So the first thing which you need to do is that you need to get a reference to the edit text. You need to get reference to the image view. So that's going to be private edit text. That is going to be edit display name, and the next thing is going to be private. That is going to be an image button, and let's name this image button as display image. And one more thing which you need to do is that you also need to create the gallery request, because what we are going to do is that we are going to start the activity for result. So let's type in private static final, and that's going to be an integer gallery underscore req, and let's set this value equal to 1. So once this thing is done, we are good to go. Now let's initialize these two things over here. So that's going to be edit display name equals, that is going to be edit text, and find view by id r.id dot, and that is nothing but it's having an id which says something like display name. So let's type in dot display name, and let's do the same thing for the display image as well. So display image equals, that's going to be image button, find view by id r.id dot, and that's going to be nothing but setup image button. So let's type in dot setup image button. So once this thing is done, let's also set up the method for this button. So what we essentially want to do is that when the user is going to actually go ahead and click this thing, we want to start the gallery event or the gallery activity. So for that, what we will do is that we will type in public void, and the method name associated with this thing is profile image button clicked. So we'll type in profile image button clicked, and that's going to have a view, not a view holder, but instead view. And in here what we are going to do is that we are going to create a new intent. So that's going to be intent, that's going to be a gallery intent. So this equals new intent. So once we have this intent, we need to go ahead and set action for this intent. So we will type in gallery intent dot set action, and to this we are going to pass in intent dot, and that is going to be action get content, because we basically want to get content from gallery. So we are going to pass in this, and we basically want the image from the gallery. So we are also going to set the type for this intent. So that's going to be gallery intent dot set type, and that is going to be obviously an image slash star. So once this thing is done, you could finally go ahead and start activity for this intent. So start activity for result and pass in this intent along with this gallery request over here. So we are going to pass in the intent, which is gallery intent, and also make sure to pass in the gallery request over here. So once this thing is set up, you're basically good to go. Now what happens when we want to start the activity for result? So let's go ahead and create that thing over here. So we will type in on activity result, and as usual the first thing which we do is that we first check for the result code and the request code. So we type if request code is equal to gallery request, and we also want to check for the result code. So if result code, that is going to be result code, if this is also equal to result okay, that means we are good to go. So now what we wish to do here is that instead of directly taking the URI of the image, what we want to do instead is that we want to make the user crop the image. Now what you could essentially do is that you could manually write number of lines of codes for manually cropping the image, but a better alternative for this is to use an inbuilt library. So what you need to do is that if you want to use that library, you simply need to open up your web browser and paste this link over here. So this is actually a GitHub link. So what you simply need to do is that you need to go to this particular link, and in here, if you go over here, as you could see, this is actually an image cropper which allows you to go ahead and crop any image which you want from the gallery. So in order to use this thing, what you need to do is that you need to go ahead and first include this dependency in your code. So I'm going to simply copy this dependency, and you need to do the same thing. So you need to go to the Gradle file and paste the dependency over here, and then simply sync the project. After that, what you need to do is that you also need to include this code in your manifest. So I'm simply going to copy this code, make sure to copy it properly. And after that, you could go in the manifest, and in here you could post your code over here. And once this thing is done, we are basically good to go. Okay, so now what we are going to do is that we are going to go ahead and in here in our main code, which is the setup activity, in the if, what we are going to do is that we are now going to get the image URI. So here what you need to do first is that you need to get the image URI. So we'll type in URI, make sure that you import URI, then type in URI equals, or let's say image URI. So image URI equals, that's going to be data dot get data, and finally we crop the image. So we type in crop image dot activity and pass in the image URI over here. And after that, what you could do is that you could basically go ahead and set the guidelines as well as aspect ratio for it. So what you could do is that you could type in dot set guidelines, and that's going to show you the guidelines when you crop the image. So that's going to be set guidelines, and in here you need to pass in the image view, which is crop image view dot guidelines on. So that's going to basically set the guidelines to on. So we'll type in guidelines dot on, and in here make sure that you don't have a semicolon. And over here what you could do is that you could also set the aspect ratio to 1:1 if you want. So you could type in set aspect ratio and simply set the aspect ratio to 1:1. And once this thing is done, the final thing which you need to do is that you need to start cropping. So we will type in start and pass in this over here. So once this thing is done, we are basically good to go. And after this, what we want to do is that right after this if statement, you also want to check for the request code and result code again. So once the cropping is done, we again want to go ahead and get the cropped image, and we basically want to set it equal to the display image, which is the image button right over there. So here what we will do is that we'll go ahead and check for the request code again. So we'll type if request code, and this is going to be equal to, let's say, crop image dot crop image activity request code. So this actually means that the image has been successfully cropped. So if this thing happens, we are basically good to go to perform next actions over here. So also make sure that you use double equal sign over here instead of the assignment sign. So here what we will do is that first we will get the result. So we'll type in crop image, and that's going to be dot activity result. So we basically get the result out of it, and let's name this result as result. So here what we want to do is that we want to get the result from the data. So we will type in crop image dot get activity result, and here you pass in the data over here. So once we get the result, what we want to make sure is that the result code is okay. So we type if result code is equal to result underscore okay. That means what we wish to do is that we wish to get the URI of the newly cropped image. So that's going to be URI, let's name this thing as result URI, and that is going to be equal to result dot get URI. And once we have the URI, what we could do is that we could go ahead and set the URI to the image button which we have. Or else what we want to do is that we want to catch the exception, that is in case if the result code is having some errors, in case the request code is having some error. So what we will do is that we will check for that as well. So if request code equals crop image dot, let's say, crop image activity result underscore error code. So if that thing happens, then you basically want to raise an exception. So that's going to be exception, let's say, error equals result dot get error. And after this, what we want to do is that once we get this URI, we basically want to go ahead and set the display image to the URI. So we'll type in display image dot set URI. So that's going to be set image URI, and set this equals to this result URI, which is nothing but the URI of our cropped image. So we are going to pass it in over here, and once this thing is done, you simply save the code. And what we will do now is that you do need to make sure that when the user is registered, you then want to redirect him to the setup activity. So right now in the setup activity, the setup activity is actually not completely over because we have not yet added the functionality for this particular button. So here we are only going to test if we are able to select an image for the setup activity. So after the register activity, instead of redirecting the user to the login activity, we are going to redirect him to the setup activity. So we'll type in setup activity dot class, and once this thing is done, let's save the code and run the application to see if this thing works. So as you could see, the application is up and running, and let me just type in some name, let's say Tommy. The email is going to be tommy@gmail.com, and let's say the password is going to be tommypass. So register, and hopefully we should be redirected to a new activity. Yeah, we are redirected to this activity over here. And now let's try to set this image button. So I'm simply going to click over here, go to Explorer, go to the SD card, go to DCIM camera, and in here let me basically select an image. Okay, so I'm going to select this horse image over here, and okay, so we do have an error because we are not able to actually go ahead and set this thing properly. So let's go ahead and resolve the issues over here and see where we actually went wrong. So if you go to run, as you could see, we have error in line number 48, and there is where our issue actually lies. Yeah, as you could see, we are having some kind of error over here in the Android manifest. So what we are going to do is that we are going to check if we actually left something. Okay, so we actually got our error. So if you open up the library which you are using, they actually clearly stated that if you are using the activity, what you need to do is that in your manifest you do need to add this thing right over here. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to copy this code, go to my manifest over here, and over here let's paste this thing right over here, and hopefully now this thing should work. So now again we are going to run this application on our device and see if this thing works. So as you could see, the application is up and running, and we are on our main activity. So let me just log out from here and let's register a new user. And I'm actually running out of names over here. So let's say we have let's say new user, let's say some name like Robin P. Let's say the username or email is robinp@gmail.com, and let's say it has some random password. So when I hit register, as you could see, now we have the setup activity, and when I click this button here, it prompts me to go to the Explorer. So I'm going to go to SD card, DCIM camera, and let me select an image over here. So I'm going to go ahead and select some random image. So let me select this image right over here, click OK, and as you could see, now I'm able to crop this image right over here. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to go ahead and crop this image to the image of the mountain and sky. So when I hit crop, as you could see, now the image is actually set over here. So we are successful in creating the application and setting up the image over here for the image button. So in the next lecture, what we will do is that we will set the username and we will add the functionality for the done button as well. So once the user hits this done button, both of these things are going to get associated with that particular user. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys were able to understand how we actually added the functionality for the image button, and also how we added the cropping functionality, which allows the user to crop an image. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.